Hey scrapbook friends, this past weekend I had the fun opportunity to do a virtual Zoom weekend Summerfest retreat with several of my Creative Memories customers and fellow advisors. We had a fabulous time cropping together and still staying safely at home. And one of the projects that we did this weekend was this Trifold mini album. And I wanted to show you how we made those and give you the directions so that you can make your own. This is a super fun little foldable album. When it's done, it will fit in a business size envelope so you can put it in the mail. It's not very thick. Depending on how much embellishing you do, you could probably make it a little bit thicker, but I think it can go as a regular letter. Probably need a couple extra stamps, but you won't have to send it as a package. So this is the first one that I did. For the 4th of July, we were able to go out of town and visit my sister and her family and spend some time in the pool. So I made these little albums for each of her kids with pictures from our weekend. And they're just made from a single piece of paper, but they fold out with all these little compartments and they're just super cute. They can stand up. So after you send the card, they can, prop this on their mantle, on their dresser, something like that. And they're so versatile because you can just use whatever cardstock you have, whatever embellishments you have. This was with the Imagine That collection from Creative Memories. This one, my favorite probably, is from my beloved Mermaid Cove, which is sadly retired. But I just think this one turned out so cute. I used some little shimmery embellishments. This one was with an older collection, Sorbet. And then this one was with Daydreamer. The hearts on the front were from a very old collection called Watercolor Love, but the inside pieces were from Daydreamer. So you can see, although they're all the same, they look very different, and so you can match your style of mini album to the recipient. I did leave the backs blank so that I can write a little note to each of my nieces and nephews when I send these to them, probably tomorrow, now that I've done this video for you and can send them off in the mail. I have also created a little cheat sheet with the folding and cutting directions. I don't know that it will be enough without watching the video. I hope that it will, but you can find this on my website, which is at www.nicolescrapbooks.com/trifold. And it's a JPEG, so you can just right click and save that to your computer and print it out. And that will show you kind of the things I'm about to show you with this. But this is kind of an abbreviated handout, leaving out a couple of the different pieces of the directions. All right, so to start this, you're going to need a 12 by 12 piece of cardstock. You want it to be a fairly sturdy piece of cardstock, not like chipboard. Chipboard would be too thick, but a nice heavyweight piece of cardstock. I'm using Creative Memories Aqua cardstock. And you're going to want, for the base of your card, a 9 by 12 sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and take my 12 by 12 sheet and trim it down to 9 by 12. But you're going to want to save this piece, and then you're going to need an extra piece of this same color, or you could use a different color later to be the other back cover, but it doesn't have to be a whole piece. You could just use a little scrap to do that. Okay, so now we have our 9 by 12 piece of cardstock, and we're going to swap out the cutting blade and put in the scoring blade. And then we're going to take this 9 by 12 piece of paper, and along the 12-inch edge, we're going to score every 3 inches. Now you can, well, let me score the first one. I always like to go up and back, just give it a couple swipes with the scoring blade. You can fold out the arm of the trimmer and just score like this, 3, 6, and 9. But I'm kind of lazy and I don't always like to fold out the base of my trimmer arm. And so sometimes what I'll do, you can't see it, but I can see it, that I'll just find the scoring line that I just did and I'll line it up right here with the 3. Because you're just going to score every 3 inches. All right, and so you're just going to see here the 3 scoring lines, 3, 6, and 9 inches. Then you're going to swap out your scoring blade. And of course, you could do this with a scoring board, or if you're careful, you could just even fold this just by creasing. And then this is the part that's a little bit tricky. And part of it's tricky because of the way I like to use my trimmer. What you're going to do is you're going to want to turn your paper and cut from 1.5 inches to 10.5 inches, 3 inches from either side. So 1.5 to 10.5 inches. But if you've watched my trimmer video before, you know that this blade housing has a white line that shows you exactly where your cutting piece is going to start. And there's a ruler here on the double arm that will, that you can measure with. This particular product that we're cutting, or this project, covers up all these grid lines. So the only way you're going to get measurements is by this ruler here on the aluminum rails, but the housing covers it up. So you can kind of turn your head and align the white line with the numbers. But for me, the easiest thing for me to do is to remember that the housing itself is 2 inches wide. And so from the white line to the edge is 1 inch. So because I want to cut at 1.5 inches, I want to put this extra blade housing at 2.5 inches. So I'm going to cut from 2.5. And because I want to end my cut at 10.5 inches, I'm going to move the housing that extra inch to 11.5 inches. All right, so hopefully that's not too confusing for you. The cut itself is from 1.5 to 10.5 inches. And then you flip it over, or you could scoot it out to the 6-inch line on your trimmer if you prefer. But you're going to do that same cut again. So starting the cut at 1.5 inches, which means my housing is at the 2.5 inch mark. And I'm going to 10.5 inches, which means my housing goes to 11.5 inches. All right, so then I have these 2 perpendicular cuts, and those are going to align with these red lines on the cutting guide, the little cheat sheet. Now we're going to swap back and put our scoring blade in one last time. And this time we're going to score at 1.5 inches. And whenever I can cut or score something that's less than 1 3/4 inches, I like to use this side, because that way I have this whole big 5.5 inch section to kind of support my paper so it doesn't sag or the weight of the paper may pull it, and just get my cuts off. So I'm going to cut on this side at 1.5. I'm going to line up at 1.5. Sorry, I'm not cutting, I'm scoring. And this time I can use the cuts with that white line just to see where I'm starting and stopping. So you're going to put your scoring blade right here on the cutting line, and you're going to score between these 2 cut lines. So you have that scoring line right here, and then flip it again 1.5 and score between the 2 cut lines. All right. And so then what I found was that it was just easiest for me if I folded the whole thing in half. And of course, using these score lines, it's super easy. And if you have a bone folder or the Creative Memories multi-purpose tool and you want to just kind of reinforce these folds, you can do that and then fold it back out this way and just kind of encourage that fold and fold it the other way. Now, these aren't the permanent folds that you're going to have for the album, so don't get confused. This is just getting those folds in there. And then we're going to take this little piece, the 1/2 inch we've scored, and fold that and reinforce that, and then fold this one this way and reinforce this fold. Okay, and so now you're starting to see it come together. But if you see on the cutting guide, I labeled them as valleys and mountains, and so I think you can figure that out. We want actually this one to go the other direction. These 2 to go like this. So these are going to be mountains. This is going to be a valley. This is a valley. It's not really a valley because half of it's flat. But there is your card base. Valley, mountain, valley, valley, mountain, valley, mountain, valley. All right, so hopefully that will make sense with the little flyer that you can see what you're trying to do. And then this is your base that's going to stand up, you know, for you to decorate. So now you're going to take your extra piece of cardstock that you cut off that 12 by 12, and you're going to cut this one down to 9 by 12. And again, I don't want to fold up my arm, so I'm just going to trim 3 inches off of this to get my 9 by 12 piece. And then I'm going to cut another, and you could use a scrap of the color, the same color cardstock. You could use a different color, a contrasting color. One of the girls in the Zoom crop this weekend used a contrasting color. She used some lighter weight shimmer cardstock for this cover, and it turned out really cute. So now you have your 2 cover pieces, front and back. We're going to fold our little album in. I will say that when this is a kind of new, sometimes these 2 little folds haven't been reinforced enough, and the album wants to fold out like this. And I had people getting frustrated like that. Just make sure you reinforce these folds, and you just have to kind of train it a little bit so that it will fold the way you want it to fold. And then you're going to want to put adhesive on these sections. Don't put any in this cutout spot, just in these sections so that you can attach the cover pieces. And this is going to reinforce the album, especially if you see right here, I cut a little bit over. You know, my lines went a little bit farther than I needed them to go. So I'm going to put some tape runner right over those cut lines, and then the cover piece is going to help reinforce those and keep those from splitting. And then you just line up the corners. And do the same thing on the back. And this is like the hard part of the construction. After this, it just gets easy because you get to do the fun decorating and, you know, make it your own. All right. So you want this part to be the front. This is the back with these covers. You know, you can see they're covering up this section, but this is the front. You could, of course, decorate the back as well if you wanted to. For the ones that I did, I just decorated the front. The squares in here, you don't have to mat every square. I did. I felt like I liked the look better when all the squares were matted, and it just gave me a little bit more decorative freedom, especially because some of my pictures weren't necessarily square. And I just took pictures and I imported them into my word processing software. You could use scrapbooking software, and tried to make them 2.5 by 2.5 inch pictures, and that allowed me to have a little bit of a photo mat around each of the in each of the squares. So I'm going to use the Creative Memories Spring Medley collection to finish decorating this, and I just have a bunch of little scraps. So I'm going to start with those because no sense in cutting into a whole big paper if you don't have to. And those are the ones I'm going to use for my little photo mats. And I'm not going to do all the photo mats because you don't need to watch me do all of that. But for the squares, you want your photo mats to be 2 3/4 inch squares. And so what I usually do is I cut a couple from each of the pieces in a collection, because you can use the front and the back. So you'll have a couple of those. I'll have a couple of these. Let's see, this is a 3 inch, so I'm going to cut 2 3/4. All right, so you guys all know how to cut squares and to decorate the pieces on your card. Now, I like to cut them all out before I glue anything down. I like to have some variety about where I put things. you know, I wouldn't want to put two of these next to each other, but it's completely a matter of your own personal preference. The only one that's tricky are these two on the end. Now this one where it's cut, you're going to want to use a 1 1/4 inch by 2 3/4. And you could use the same size for the outside edge, but let me show you. So 1 1/4 by 2 3/4. So this is going to go on this little half piece right here. And I could put this same size right here, but when you do that, you get a little bit bigger gap between the photo mats because all the rest of the squares it's allowing for the cut line. And so for me, I just found that I liked the look of it better if I made these two little outside pieces 1 1/4 wide, but I made them the full 3-inch height of a full square and not a matted square, if that makes sense. So 1 1/4 by 3. I'll cut another 1 1/4 by 3. So I can show you, actually I'll cut another 1 1/4 by 2 3/4. And these measurements are on the handout as well. So you can see that if I put this one here, that's the 1 1/4 by 2 3/4. And I put this one next to it. I mean, it still works. It works fine. But you do have a little bit extra of a gap between these two because there isn't any cut line. I just really preferred the look if I made this a little bit longer and lined this up with the edges of the cut. So if that makes sense to you. And I put that on here about how you may want the two outside pieces to be 3 inches high, a matter of personal preference. So you can, the measurements are on here for both of these. I hope it's not too confusing to have those two different sizes for basically the same piece. And I love to use double-sided paper because then I've got all my pieces already cut. Okay, so once you get all this down, then you're going to want to use your pictures that are 2 1/2 inches square, or they can be smaller. This was like 2 1/2 by 2, I think. Just whatever you had that fit. This one with Mermaid Cove, it has these fun shimmery embellishments, and I wanted to put those on, and I had fewer pictures of this niece. And so I left a little bit more blank space and put the embellishments on. This is the only section where you can expand out of the photo square because it doesn't have to bend. I did decide that I didn't want to put any pictures on these two outside panels, simply because that's the part that when you open this up, that's where you're going to be touching all the time. And if you have pictures there, then they're going to get fingerprints and stuff on them because this doesn't have any kind of a page protector. So up to you if you want to then decorate this backside. That, you know, that would add a little bit to the bulk. I don't know how that would work to go through the mail. You might have to pay a package rate or a higher postage rate. But I think just like this is very cute, very perfect. What a fun little thing this has been for me to create to send to my little nieces and nephews who we had such a fun time with. And I hope that you will have a lot of success and a lot of fun making these little trifold mini albums. I think the original trifold shutter is a card idea, and I did not make up this modification. I found several people on YouTube that had made cards like this, and so I was inspired by them. And I hope that it also inspires you and that you have fun creating. Again, the flyer is going to be on my website, www.nicole'scrapbooks.com/trifold. I will put the link in the description so that you can access it and have that as a reference when you create your own. Thank you so very much, and happy scrapbooking.